Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another Webinar Wednesday. This week, we are focusing on VIK, or Virtues Imaging Kit, and we have one of our solution engineers, Joe Marsden, here to talk a little bit more about what it is and why imaging will be important for your school. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Joe. Hi, Joe.
Hello, everybody. Nice to have you all here. Just a little bit about me, I guess, if that's interesting at all. I've been with Virtue now for 3.5 years-ish, and rose through the ranks of managed service technician, and here we are at solutions now, and I actually cut my teeth on solutions via the Virtue Imaging Kit, because a lot of the primary schools I was supporting in my early days at Virtue were seriously lagging behind, and they were still on Windows 7. I know a lot of people out there not confident in 8 and 8.1, so they hovered around 7 because it was familiar. It's a strong operating system. So we had a lot of customers as a result coming to us and saying, I'm hearing good things about this Windows 10, but it's intimidating. It's a little bit scary. They've got these new apps, and 8 and 8.1 had apps, and that all looked like it was for mobile devices, tablets, and phones. And is Windows 10 like that? We don't really want that. Of course, we're several years down the line now, and we know in hindsight that Windows 10 caters to that, but it is more kind of akin to a classic Windows experience, like 7 was. So we had a lot of customers coming to us with those questions, and like I said, first-hand experience with a lot of primaries and some secondaries that didn't really know how to go forward. So that was why we devised the Virtual Imaging Kit. The thing about it is yes, it's got a nice Virtue branded label on it, but it isn't proprietary at all. There's nothing about it that's, we're not locking you down into a very Virtue specific way where only we have the keys. Every component of it is freely available. It's a Windows Server role. It's a few downloads off the internet away, and all the documentation's on there. The Virtual Imaging Kit simply is comprised of a Windows Server installation, either virtual or physical, but we tend to lean towards the virtual route these days. And that server has Windows deployment services configured on it as a role. And on top of that, we've got the Windows 10 ADK, which is one component of it, which kind of encompasses the nitty-gritty specifics of the operating system that you're choosing to deploy as your image. And we have the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, which is the GUI, the graphical user interface, that we carry out a lot of our customizations with, that you'll be trained up on as part of the Virtual Imaging Kit solution being put in on site. And as sometimes, I wouldn't say it's optional, but for many it is, because they've already got a strong Active Directory and group policy structure. But we can also assist with that side of things as well, to make sure that everyone has a consistent experience. That is one of the, again, going back to that fear of Windows 10, because it looks quite fresh and new, and instead of everything being round, it's very hard edged, and everything's dark now, and things have moved around, and I don't quite know where everything is, and we've got these big colourful tiles now, although those have actually finally gone away recently, but it's quite a bit different. So network administrators, IT coordinators, they're all wanting to streamline that to make it as simple, direct, uncluttered as possible for staff, students alike. So part of that we can incorporate as part of our work with the virtual imaging kit is also a look at your group policy and Active Directory structure, and we can work with you on that in tandem with creating the image side of things to sprucing up the management and educating you on it as we go. Because there's nothing worse than somebody like me coming in, doing a load of technical work, throwing a load of jargon at you, clicking a load of buttons, and then leaving you to it. It's very much a collaborative process, and I always make sure that when I've been rolling out the virtual imaging kit over the past couple of years, that's the core of it. Like I say, the technical bits are all well and good, which we'll get onto in just a moment. But yeah, the most successful virtual imaging kit projects that I've carried out have been collaborative. So moving a little bit distracted there, but moving forward, all of those components, like I said, they're available to download. Obviously, you'll need some licensing for the operating system and the software that you're wanting to deploy as part of your image. That's not down to us, but otherwise, it's all freely available, and as is the documentation. The kind of secret sauce, if you will, is that makes the virtual imaging kit is just how we kind of put that all together. And again, it's not overly complex. I guess we're kind of using the core of those products in combination with one another. But by virtue of that documentation being available online, VIK's great because you can run away with it then if you choose to. You can get even more granular with the customization. Specific images for specific hardware if you choose to. You've got some Dells in one classroom and you've got some HPs in another, and for whatever reason, you want kind of a hands-off method of this image is going to deploy to that machine because it is that type of machine, as opposed to fettling around and tweaking that yourself as you go. And because that is another big part of the VIK process, the configuration we do, we try and make it so it's as hands-off as possible. So once we've done the configuration, and we've collaborated with you on what exactly needs to be in your image, the software, do you want your antivirus in, or is that going to get pushed out later, or how are we going to license the operating system, all that jazz. We've come to an agreement on that, done a bit of testing, we've captured it, great, it's ready to deploy. But part of that secret sauce is making it so when you get a machine new, fresh out of box, plug it into the networking power, fire it up, do your network boot. The only question you should be really presented with is what do you want the computer to be called. You give it a name and you hit go, and off it goes. It's got just the amount of drivers there that it needs to get the ball rolling, with scope for you to add the full set if you choose. It'll install Windows, obviously with all the software included, because we've captured the image through WDS and MDT. It'll join it to the domain with a user that has no privileges on your domain other than what is needed to that specific organizational unit. So you're not using a strong domain administrator account or anything to do a very small minor task, best practice and all that. So it throws it on your domain with the name that you've given it into the OU that you want it to land in, and it'll reboot itself, or we can have it just shut down. And that gives you the power and the choice to then, 4 o'clock at the end of the day, you've got your new kit installed, just go around the room, boot all the machines, get them going, hit go, hop in the car, get home for some tea, come in the next morning, the whole suite's there ready for you to go. you might just have to drag them out of that OU in Active Directory into the one that you maybe need them to be in on a specific case by case, whatever administration policies you've got going on there, and it's all ready to go. And we've had great success with that at high schools, primary schools, colleges, technical colleges, and people haven't really said boo to a goose. I think so far it's been a successful product for the company. I'm a big fan. Again, the big plus is, as with a lot of stuff at Virtue, it's collaborative. It's I like to be able to work with the customers on projects like this as opposed to for, and because the needs of your end users are so important, it makes sense for it to very much be a conversational thing that we build on together. So sure that the foundations are kind of set in boring technical, very concrete things, but we'll build upon that and make it personal to your school, your team's needs.
And that's a really good point, actually, Joe, because that's the way that our technical team has always tended to work, on our account managers. We don't have a one size fits all solution that we just throw to everybody and his dog. We know and we understand that every school is individual. They all have different staff and students who need different things, and administrators, and this year's proven really to a lot of people that there's a lot of different things that they need to consider, and so working with us rather than working for you and having everything prescribed, or vice versa, and us being very, very prescriptive about the way that we want to work. We're just not really about that at Virtue at all. It just doesn't work for us. It doesn't work for our customers, and I think that's why we've kept so many customers for such a long time.
Yeah, that's precisely right. Yeah. Some people can go into these things with a very clear-cut way of doing things, which is great. To have the conviction of knowing what you need, but a lot can come out of those dialogues for both sides. Having spoken with customers in the past, I've taken things away from Virtual Imaging Kit projects that I've been able to take elsewhere, that maybe perspectives I've not considered, questions that hadn't been asked before, that sort of thing. So it works out for everybody.
And it's very beneficial that you've just said questions, because funnily enough, we've got some pre-event questions today.
Oh, lovely.
So before any of our webinar Wednesdays, you can email through to marketing@virtuetechnologies.co.uk, and we will take the questions and we will ask them to whoever is on the call with us today. Obviously, it's Joe, and I'm really hoping you're able to answer these, Joe. Obviously, if he isn't at this point in time, he'll go away, think about it, and we will contact you after the fact to make sure that we've been able to actually answer your questions. But we're deer in headlights. Let's go, Joe.
Yay,
So,
my favourite bit.
so our first question is, how has VIK been performing when new releases of Windows 10 become available? Obviously, Tuesday is usually update day in the world of Microsoft, so that's fun for people.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the updates we're probably talking about here is the twice a year feature updates. So you should be getting the first one every April, and you should be getting the second one every September, but I don't think that's happened once. It's always months later, never months earlier, which is fine. We'd rather them get it right. Interestingly, 21H1 just came out, I think 3-4 weeks ago. It wasn't even a big deal. It took milliseconds to install. It was what we call an enablement package, and it just ticked a few boxes and turned zeros to ones and enabled some dormant features. It was very boring. And you often find that with the early year ones, but it's the latter year ones that become, I'm going to use the air quotes, exciting. And so there's usually, as this question suggests, a lot of trepidation around when those particular versions go out because they can be quite hefty. And, is this solution going to break? And the answer, up to this point, I can confidently say is no. It's never once been a problem. The only thing you have to be aware of in some cases is the ADK component that I mentioned earlier, which contains a lot of the Windows 10 specific information in there that is kind of gets customized and creates that WIM file at the end that is the custom image. That needs to be updated alongside the windows that you're attempting to capture. So whenever capturing a later version of Windows 10, maybe check the version of your ADK, and that's usually all we do. And that's not something we've typically charged for either. It's very much just you reach out to us, ask the question, we'll give you the answer. Because quite honestly, before I left, when the installation was done, that would have already been mentioned. So why get you to pay for something you've already been given? So and that's only been the only caveat I've ever seen with those upgrade paths, and maybe an update to MDT, and you might have to click a button to regenerate the image that your client's network to for the image to deploy. So yeah, it's no feature update yet has been a stumbling block, which is it's great that I can say that.
And not much work to be done either by the user to make them compatible either. So that's lovely.
Indeed, yeah. Couple of clicks, maybe wait for a few bars to fill. Par for the course for us guys.
So one of our next questions is, what have been the most common pros for customers you've installed VIK for?
It would be the hands-off kind of one touch, two touch maybe approach to the actual end result. Like as I alluded to before, get that newer existing suite of IT machines, fire them all up, input a computer name, and in some cases, if you've got multiple images, you may then have to click a radio button about, do I want this image or do I want that image? Other than that, hit go.
So would that come in when you're talking about having different images for different groups?
Yeah, so the most common use case for that is they'll be very similar. We'll have like a baseline image created, and then we might add like one or two pieces of software to it, which is then classed as another image that we capture again,
Right.
purely just to kind of eliminate that overhead for the technicians on site, so that when they're deploying a classroom machine, there's very little difference, or there's no additional work they have to do to take that classroom machine and then maybe make it into one that's built for a member of SLT in an office, or a classroom teacher, someone like that. Because it would be you can just have the one image and then fire it up and uninstall a couple of bits, and then install a couple of extra bits. But that's time you might not want to spend, and so having that versatility to actually be able to have, even if, like I say, the very few differences between them, quickly just flick between a couple options before you hit go, and confidently know that when you throw your jacket on, leave, come back the next morning, they're sat there waiting for you, and you might have to do a couple of clicks of admin from your Office console after that, but otherwise, jobs are good.
So actually, the amount of time that it could save your IT team, and if you're not actually in an IT team and you're, another member of staff, but craving IT team and they're always busy having to set up loads and loads of new machines and all that, it just completely eliminates that then.
And you can kind of think of the imaging solution as not just a way of provisioning new devices or rolling out a large update, but also a way of troubleshooting, or some might argue it's lazy troubleshooting. But if somebody comes to you with a cripplingly devilish problem with their machine, if you chose to dedicate man hours to untangling that web, um, that's time that could be spent elsewhere. The versatility of the imaging kit, or well, any imaging solution, of course, is throw it into the network, just flatten it. If you're confident and the user whose device this is confident that their data isn't local because of the group policy you put in place, it's all on network locations, home drives, shared drives, maybe even on SharePoint or OneDrive, then there's no reason to spend all that time fixing something that is a bizarre quandary, as we often get. Just stick it in and nuke it, hand it back to them the next morning.
Job's a good one.
Mm.
So there's another question here, possibly from a current customer actually. So do we need to enlist Virtue to come back when we want a new image doing?
You're more than welcome to, especially if you make good coffee. I'm always happy to come back. But no, before we leave, when we do the initial virtual imaging kit installation, we sit down with you, and I give spiel very much like this, I suppose, where um, I go through every little bit that I've installed and explain what it is and why it's there. Not to, you know, degrees that'll give you an earache, but enough that you understand why it's there, what it does, um, in the hope that if you do have to do some troubleshooting, you have an idea. But also why everything's configured the way it is. A specific case, probably where I spend most of my time when I do these kind of tutorials post installation, is in the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. There is a part of the interface. It brings up this rules sheet essentially, which if you've ever seen an answer file, it's that basically. It's a load of lines that basically say, do you want to do this, yes or no, or how do you want this to happen? What domain do you want it to join? What user is going to do that? What organizational unit do you want the device to be sorted into? Um, you know, do you want these mandatory applications installing after the image is deployed? Blah 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 blah, and that's the real meat of it. So I kind of make sure, above everything else, that I go through that specifically, so you understand how that all fits together. Explain the components you may need to update, as I alluded to earlier, when a new version comes out, what you would need to do to refresh the installation procedure, so that when it comes to it and you decide, okay, 21H2 is out now, it's been out for a few weeks, we're happy with it, it's stable, let's get a new virtual machine fired up on our host that is going to be our gold machine, which we'll throw all our software on, and we'll capture that, just like Joe and the team kind of guided us through 6, 12, 18 months ago. And you should have the power to do that, no problem. We've had many customers. VIK's been a one-time thing, maybe the occasional question, but otherwise it's a one and done solution. They're content with it, they understand it, and they've been able to go away and keep things at the tip of the spear.
Perfect. So our next question is, we have Windows 10 right now, but we're struggling to lock it down in a way we want to make it consistent and make it consistent. Does VIK also incorporate fresh group policy? Now, I think you've already touched on this, but
It doesn't always. It's something that we've done for a lot of people, because it is an important piece of the puzzle. It's all well and good having the latest and greatest Windows all across your network, but if everything before was locking down very specific things for, say, 7, things that you might not want students to be able to do, or access places that you don't you wouldn't want them to access, etc. Then yeah, it's important, but it isn't always part of the project. But if you need it to be, we're more than happy to consult on it and work with you to either create a segregated group policy environment in your Active Directory structure, or tweak the one that you've got now using loopback and WMI filters and things like that, to bring you up to speed and give you that security and give you that streamlining for your users as well. I think a lot of people see group policy as a means to corner people or be the fun police. But as much as I like that title, I more try and see it as a positive light of instead of giving people all of these doors they could look behind, maybe just give them the one or two, which makes their day-to-day working much easier.
Okay, and there's one more question here. So we're still running quite a few servers on 2012 RD, so that's a pretty old version of Windows Server. So as a separate thing from this question, I would actually advise that you don't use that just for security purposes, but that's just me. But this question is, do I need to upgrade in order to get the Virtue imaging kit?
Like you say, Kat, we probably would like it to come away from 2012 R2 now, but it is still technically supported, so I can't give you too much of a slap on the wrist for that. But it is possible, but it's one of the only things we tend to be quite firm on, generally speaking, unless it's absolutely out of the question due to budgetary restraints and whatnot. Then we would almost always certainly say, yeah, let's get you up to server 2019, which again might be scary to some people out there because a lot of people still run in 2016, but really it's just a bit of a reskin of 2016. There's not much in it, so don't worry. But yeah, we would strongly advise it, but it has been done on earlier versions, absolutely, especially a couple of primary skills where the upgrade path hasn't really been an option.
And speaking of primary schools, actually, we do have a kind of another flavour of Virtue imaging kit, which we did mention that we would talk about very briefly on this call, which I believe is called MIC, the mobile imaging kit.
Oh man, I was hoping you wouldn't use the acronym before I had a chance to. Yeah, so if for whatever reason your network can't take the VIK, then we'll have to take the MIC instead. Yeah, the mobile imaging kit is it's the same product ultimately, but it's without you relying on a in-house server. The common kind of scenario there being, yes, you've got like a VMware host or a Hyper-V host, but the RAM is maxed out on it. You've not really got much disk space left, and the processors are kind of being gobbled up by whatever else is on there. But you still need a method of getting an image out that isn't sticking a custom WIM on a USB and going around all the machines and doing them individually. Because I haven't got time for that. Nobody's got time for that. It's a standalone installation that is separate from a domain that sits on a portable machine, basically, that we bring with us, with a switch and some cables and whatever else to make it as easy as possible. And we plug it in, do a bit of configuration, some very specific on-site testing because we have to tweak the configuration for the the network that we're on, and then otherwise it's very much it's the same deal. We'll often create the actual gold image on a like a VMware instance on my laptop, let's say, and we'll capture it from there onto MIC and deploy it from MIC just like we would VIC. So yeah, that's been quite useful for, again, a lot of, like I say, primary skills predominantly, smaller scale operations and and whatnot. And we'll leave the custom image WIM file, somewhere at the school. So if suddenly the school comes into get a lot of computers on hand that they weren't expecting, they don't feel trapped. Then they can just get the MIC brought in again. Don't have to pay for the configuration angle. They can just kind of pay for the deployment of their existing image that was previously captured. So quite a versatile solution.
Okay, so that would actually be perfect for people who have recently had an influx of DFE devices.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I was going to say something witty there, but then it left.
I'm just going to double check that nobody's asked us any questions in the chat box today. So no, we've not had any additional questions apart from those that were pre-sent in. So I think that was Virtue's Imaging Kit, and I think this is pretty much the end. So all there is to say is bye, and thank you very, very much for joining us today for another Webinar Wednesday. And thank you very, very much to Joe for taking some time out of your busy engineering schedule to join us.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks. Bye-bye.